make no mistake, authorization in Section 1225 of the underlying bill authorizes our U.S. military to go to war with Iran. This is one of the main reasons why I voted against this bill in committee, was specifically because of this provision that authorizes the Secretary of Defense and the Secretary of State to, quote, develop and implement a strategy with foreign partners to counter the destabilizing activities of Iran, end of quote. The provision does not define what destabilizing activities they want our troops and taxpayer dollars to counter. It does not define a clear objective or end state for our troops to achieve. In addition, this provision shuts the American people out from this decision entirely by circumventing Congress's constitutional responsibility to declare war and giving unilateral power and unending authorization to counter Iran to this and future administrations without defining in any way, shape, or form what the objective really is. It sidelines Congress and the American people entirely, with the only requirement being that the administration report to Congress after their plan is being implemented, and only for the next 4 years, while the authorization for war has no expiration date. It gives after-the-fact license for what is already happening in the Middle East. Since 2015, without express congressional authorization, U.S. troops have been providing direct military support to Saudi Arabia and Yemen through information sharing, logistical support, and refueling Saudi warplanes which have dropped U.S.-made bombs on Yemeni civilians. The most recent attack was on a Yemeni wedding party, with 2 rounds of bombing killing more than 20 people and wounding dozens of others. This Saudi-led interventionist war has created one of the worst humanitarian disasters in history, worsening a situation that has led to mass starvation, cholera outbreaks, devastation, thousands of civilian deaths, and tens of thousands of injuries. This provision gives total authority to the administration to keep U.S. troops in Syria or any other country in the Middle East as long as they deem necessary, an intention clearly stated by members of this administration. To name a few examples, UN Ambassador Nikki Haley said last month that U.S. troops would stay in Syria indefinitely until their goals are accomplished, namely to counter Iran. National Security Advisor John Bolton said in 2015 in an op-ed entitled "To Stop Iran's Bomb, Bomb Iran," that the United States could do a thorough job of destruction, but Israel alone can do what's necessary. Such action should be combined with vigorous American support for Iran's opposition aimed at regime change in Tehran, end of quote. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo recently advocated that the U.S. will, quote, crush Iran with economic and military pressure unless it changes its behavior in the Middle East. So it's clear that if left unchecked, war hawks in the Trump administration will drag our country into more Middle East wars, leaving destruction in its wake around the world and here at home. Trillions of taxpayer dollars have already been spent on these regime change wars in the Middle East since 9/11. Rather than dumping more taxpayer dollars in these wars, as this provision authorizes, we should instead be investing in rebuilding our community right here at home. For too long, the U.S. has engaged in military adventurism and interventionist wars, sending our troops overseas with no clear objective or end state. Countering Iran is not an end state that our military or diplomats can achieve. Without a clear objective, you end up in endless war. So what's the objective of this authorization for war? Is it regime change in Iran? Regime change in Syria? More war against Iran in Syria, Yemen? I strongly urge my colleagues to consider the serious consequences of Section 1225 being enacted, because it would authorize any or all of these. It is Congress's responsibility and constitutional role to declare war. The American people have a right to real debate on such a declaration. I urge my colleagues to support the passage of my uphold this responsibility. Mr. Speaker, how much time do I have remaining?
Gentlewoman has 1 minute remaining.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. At this time, I'd like to yield 1 minute to my colleague from California, Congressman Ro Khanna.